Good afternoon, everyone. I am Parsa Mufti. Welcome to News Platform's discussion on why Nehru. Pandit Nehru can do no right. He is to blame for all that's wrong with India. He is solely responsible for all that India is not. Whether it's in regard to India's strategic non-alignment, problems with China or Kashmir, Nehru is blamed for staying away from the world. Nehru is also faulted for India's domestic problems. His insistence on secularism has suppressed the majority. His continuation of reservations has disenfranchised the upper castes. His emphasis on planned development has left India backward. And his tacit endorsement of dynastic politics has destroyed India. This is the semi-official narrative that is continuously endorsed by the ruling dispensation. Many have defended or countered this claim with generalizations that have not convinced India. We are here to objectively gauge the facts and let you decide. Why Nehru? I am privileged to host Sitaram Yechuri Sir, General Secretary CPIM, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, eminent historian and author, and Pushparaj Deshpande ji, Director of Samruddha Bharat Foundation. Professor Mukherjee, it has been argued that the core values of the Nehruvian consensus include secularism, liberty, fraternity, social justice, and a welfare state. Each of these are being questioned and altered. Many have asked for their scrapping. In fact, 2 private member bills are being moved to remove secularism and socialism from the constitution. Is it time to give up these values? What are the core values of what we know now as the Nehruvian consensus, and how are they relevant today, considering that there are so many people who've asked for revisiting them?
Well, I think you have already listed most of the core values, and I would not give that much importance to what you're saying, that most people are asking for the removing of these values, and that some people have put private, bills in the parliament. I personally still believe very strongly that the vast majority of the people of this country are secular. I also believe that the vast majority of the people of this country are in favor of an egalitarian, humane society. I do not think that this country has sanctioned or approved of what we have seen in the last 2 months. The horrible sights that we have been made to witness, which have made all of us hang our heads down in shame. A dead mother on a railway platform being awaited by her little baby. I mean, the stories of a young girl taking her father back on a bicycle all the ways from Delhi to Bihar, and it's stories of bodies piling up in hospitals. I mean, the whole thing is so bizarre that to anybody thinks that the present system as it is defensible, and that what Nehru did has to be done away with, I think they need to really get their heads examined. If anything, I think today it is those core values which were embodied in the Constitution, which were formulated during the long years of the freedom struggle through a long process of debate, discussion, and actual experimentation and practice at the level of the people. It is those values that we need to go back to, not do away with them. On the contrary, do you think that the way to fight this virus is by doing what the government, some people in the government started to do, and the Chief Minister of Gujarat has again done yesterday? I was shocked to see this morning an interview in the print of the Chief Minister Rupani, who's again trying to hide behind the story of the Tabligh, which everybody now knows the story is finished and over, even if there was any substance in it for a short while. But he's still going on with that story to hide. Where will he hide? After the High Court of Gujarat has said that the civil hospital is worse than a dungeon. Are those some, red flag waving the Naxals who are saying that? No, it is our judiciary. that is saying this. Where can you go and hide? You cannot. I mean, you have brought this country, the present dispensation is bringing this country to a point where we must all come out and strongly assert those values and fight for them on the streets.
Taking from what you're saying, ma'am, Pushparaj sir, the ruling dispensation believes that these values and the work done in the last 70 years has resulted in India's deplorable state today. They have blamed Nehru for this. Do you agree?
Obviously not. I mean, to make the assertion that India is in a deplorable state is just facetious. Look at the number of countries that became independent around the same time as India. Yet, India is one of the few countries that remained a democracy and grew consistently. In the last 60 years, we have more or less become self-sufficient in providing roti kapda makan or sadak bijli pani. And now, in the last 10 years, when the UPA government was in the government, they started bringing around a focus towards the Jaan Jahan Jivika, the rights-based paradigm. Which other country in the world, whether it's the United States, the United Kingdom, did all of this without A, the suppression of democratic rights and civil liberties, and B, without the added benefit of looting other countries' resources? Now, the ruling dispensation and those people who you are arguing are saying that India is in a deplorable state have also appropriated Sardar Patel and Dr. Ambedkar, and they're praising them for the achievements of India. Now, how can you praise one set of leaders and not the other set of leaders? Nehru, Sardar Patel, all of these people worked in a partnership. India became what she is today. India became who she is today because of the partnership of everyone. So, I mean, the Nehruvian consensus, Nehru himself has argued, was a collaboration of equals. And to make the assertion now that India is not developed is completely ill-founded and overpitched.
I agree, sir. Sitaram sir, Pandit Nehru, along with India's founders, established a number of institutions as well as the principles underlying the terms of engagement between those institutions. For example, he ensured that the parliament did not just function as is. He took great pains to raise the level of debate by participating in debates, question hours, mentoring not just the executive but also the legislative. Today, the parliament is a mere rubber stamp. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, to answer your larger question, which you started with, you see, I think the assault is not only on Nehru as a person or what he represented, but the assault is actually on the very concept of what I would call the idea of India. Now, idea of India is actually an inclusive India, where everybody has equal, whatever be your status, your ethnicity, your differences, everybody, irrespective of caste, creed or sex, unquote, that is your constitution. And this idea of an inclusive India is precisely what is being attacked. And Nehru was the symbol of this inclusive India. So if Nehru is being targeted today, he is targeted for the concept of what India is all about and what we are all, who are born in this India, are all about. So please remember, it's not an assault on a personality. It's not an assault for looking for a scapegoat. It is an assault on a conception of what is our country. And this is precisely the RSS agenda. The BJP is nothing but the political arm of the RSS. Their agenda all along was not a secular democratic republic, but a rabidly intolerant, a theocratic, a fascistic Hindu Rashtra or Hindutva Rashtra as they defined it. Now, it is this transformation that is happening today. They are metamorphosing, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, they are metamorphosizing India into what is their ideological project and conception. So, Nehru has to be demolished if that has to succeed. So, Nehru not only built the institutions, he actually gave substance to the meaning of what is we the people. People's centrality of the Indian Constitution is people's sovereignty. And how do people exercise their sovereignty? They exercise it by electing their representatives once in 5 years, who make the executive accountable to the legislature. The executive is accountable to the legislature, the legislators are accountable to the people. That is how we the people works. If parliament doesn't function, the centrality of the link of our constitution breaks down. That is why Nehru was very conscious. He built these institutions, built the parliamentary committees, built all the four fundamental pillars on which this idea of India exists. That is secular democracy, federalism, social justice, economic self-reliance. There may be a lot of differences between us and Nehru on the question of this economic self-reliance, how it ought to be achieved. But that is on how it ought to be achieved, not on the substance of the objective. What is today being done in the name of self-reliance, apart from all the jibes you have that it is self plus reliance, it's not self-reliance, but what is today being done is self-subservience, not self-reliance. And that is why Nehru has to be demolished if self-subservience has to be advanced. So I think it's a much larger project, not merely anti-Nehru. It is anti what India is, what India should be, and what India we will inherit and we should preserve.
So, continuing on the same line, India's founders, especially Nehru, took great care in institutionalizing the terms of engagement. And between the different institutions like the legislative, the executive, the judiciary, and also the media. But these principles have been completely demolished, and the current dispensation as well as the opposition have played a great role in dismantling these. What happened here?
Ask me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, what has happened here is, let me tell you, is the degree of commitment that is required to protect India as it is today. That is why me and my party have always been saying, first task is to save India today in order to change India for the better. But on the question of saving India today, you will require a degree of commitment. Professor Mridula was the one who documented the entire history of the first early years of our independence till the assassination of the Mahatma. And you just see all these leaders, they were there taking Mohalla meetings in every corner. Gandhiji was in Calcutta when we were unfurling the red flag. I mean, I was not born yet, but when the red flag was being unfurled on the Red Fort. Then, I mean, what was he doing there? Fighting these communal riots. He tells everybody in the cabinet, saying that what are you trying to save in Delhi? Nothing will be saved if you don't stop this. So move out of there, come to Bihar, come to Bengal, go to UP, and every single cabinet minister led by Nehru, Patel, Maulana, I mean, they all were all over the streets mobilizing people against this communal virus. It took the death of the Mahatma, I think, unfortunately, to actually stop that frenzy then. But I mean, it is what we are seeing today is that realization that has to come from these political parties. Unfortunately, politics has been deprived and depraved so much that it is no longer on principles and on issues that politicians today survive. If politics, unfortunately, has become a career-making institution, if that is the case, then, as Ambedkar himself said, this constitution, I think it was actually, I don't know, Mridula could correct me, whether it was Rajendra Prasad or Ambedkar, the constitution may be very good, but it depends on the people who will implement this, carry this out. That is where the lacuna comes. That is where our appeal. We've had many differences as the left will continue to have. We have our class battles. But the fundamental premise is that if this secular democratic India and our constitutional order doesn't remain, no progressive change towards socialism is also possible. And that is why today we think this is a fundamental task. Save India today, and we will continue our struggle to change India for the better. But it is this saving India today that is being assaulted. So the institutions you're talking about, look at all the institutions that Nehru built. Look at the public sector, the temples of modern India. They are being virtually looted today. Look at the institutions of higher education. The university from which I did my post-graduation, named after him, still has his quotation, his address to the Allahabad University, I think in 1948, where he says the university stands for humanism, for tolerance, for the adventure of ideas. Mridula would know, she is a professor emeritus from the same university. And if all is well with our universities, then all is well with our nation. What are we doing with higher education? What are we doing? Destroying the basis of one of the educational systems that produce everybody today. If your CEOs of your multinational corporations sitting in the USA today, they're products of this system. Your Abdul Kalams, they're all products of this system, and so are all of us. And if you destroy this in order to either make money through privatization, commercialization, or for your communal agenda and your communal project, then you're breaking up the future of India. So every single institution that was built up for sustaining the building up of what I would again go back to the idea of India, that is being assaulted today, and that is required. If they have to achieve their objective of a rabidly intolerant, theocratic, fascistic order, then this has to be destroyed. So the target is that is much larger. Today it may be Nehru, tomorrow it will be XYZ. Anybody, either you appropriate them, seek to appropriate, not appropriate, seek to appropriate them, or you demolish them. So that is what is happening today. So it's not merely just one institution or the other, but it's part of a larger jigsaw puzzle. And what we are picking up is one piece here and there, saying there's it, but what we are not seeing is that the whole thing is disintegrating. That has to be protected. That is what our appeal to the political parties is. If India doesn't survive, neither your party nor my party will survive. So what is the point right now is to ensure that this project doesn't succeed. And that is, I think, what is the important aspect, and our appeal to all the other political parties to see through, even through this pandemic. What is this? Are we fighting the pandemic? Are we providing relief to the people? Or are they pushing their agenda? What is the meaning of picking up these kids from Jamia and all these people now under draconian acts like the sedition or the UAPA? What is the meaning of taking all the intellectuals and lawyers who supported the marginalized sections, the oppressed, and putting them in jail under the NSA? What is the agenda that you are carrying on? Your agenda today is either, like Professor Mridula said, on the Tablighi thing, falling back on that in order to sharpen the communal polarization, conducting social media fake news campaigns, saying this is the Corona Jihad, and an Islamophobia that is again polarizing society, when the fight against the pandemic can only succeed if we are all united. It's a united battle of the Indian people. But that you divide them, you pursue your agenda, attack civil liberties, democratic rights, jail people, put them in, and then you completely adopt an economic policy in the name of stimulus package, which is a total sellout of India's national assets. So what is the agenda you're doing? In this crisis situation, a health emergency, you are relentlessly pursuing your agenda and not concentrating on either fighting the pandemic or providing relief for the people. I don't know, Professor Mridula can tell with greater authority whether such a huge migration of people, the long marches they're seeing, whether they were seen at the time of partition for such a long period of 2 months. Such a huge, large number. This is a sea of humanity on the Indian roads. Yeah. And with all the tragedies that you have. It's just not merely heartrending, but it is a tragedy of an immense proportion. Yeah. But even then, if you have a government that pursues its sectarian agenda and not the interests of the people of the country, then please understand the larger picture. It's just not Nehru alone. It's every one of us who believes in this secular democratic republic, this constitutional order.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, Pandit Nehru laid great emphasis on scientific temper and was instrumental in establishing a number of institutions, including the DRDO and ISRO, which laid the foundations for India's growth in various sectors. Today, not only is there a systemic reversal of scientific temper, but an attack on those very institutions that he established. For example, as per the recently announced Atmanirbhar package, every PSU will be opened up for privatization except for 4 in every sector. This is highly problematic. As for example, in atomic and nuclear energy, there are over 19 PSUs. What does that imply for India's national security?
I think you raised a very, very pertinent point because, as Sitaram just said, we have to make the people aware that under the cover of all these policy measures, such as being taken to rejuvenate the economy, etc., what is being done is that all the hidden agenda of this government is being smuggled in at a time where people cannot come out and protest because the laws are stringent, the fear of infection, everything put together makes large-scale mass protest of the kind that we saw against the CAA now very difficult. Of course, I think the biggest question today before civil society and the political class is how do we overcome this? How do we find ways of protesting that are effective? So, but to go back to your question, I completely agree with you that this is very, very dangerous, and I think it's very important that these are brought out into the public domain. I have been reading very carefully all that's being put out in the press of this, the agenda, the economic revival, etc. But I did not see this fine print which you are pointing out today, that there is something which says that in every sector only 4 need to be retained and the rest can all be privatized. I think if this is so, this must be brought out, much debate and discussion should happen, it should be highlighted in the press, it should be brought before the people, and the contradiction with what Prime Minister Modi just has been emphasizing, Atmanirbhar Bharat, this whole charade which they are doing of self-reliance, which is a whole lot of nonsense because there's not a single program which they have put forward which actually advances self-reliance. But then we have to find ways of bringing these contradictions out. You're talking about scientific temper. On the one hand, the Prime Minister of India emphasizes beating off vessels and, lighting of candles in order to, fight this virus. I mean, you can say that he's a very good psychologist and he's, revving up people's mood and whatnot, and you need that. I mean, come on. Surely from a Prime Minister we expect much more in terms of explaining to people and guiding people and leading people into what really needs to be done to fight this epidemic and not come out with things of this kind. All this goes against any notion of scientific temper, whereas this is such a good opportunity, in fact, to forefront your scientists, to forefront your doctors, to actually teach scientific method to the masses of the people who are at the moment, their minds are open to learn scientific methods of hygiene because they understand and they know that this is connected somewhere. What they are facing, the life threats which they are facing need scientific answers. This actually would be such a wonderful opportunity of mass education of science. We are doing the opposite. I don't even want to go into all the theories about, indigenous remedies and whatnot that can be advanced, which risking people's lives by making people believe a lot of nonsense, But at a very, very fundamental level, I think the point which Sitaram made repeatedly is that we have to be aware that there is an agenda, a very clear-cut agenda which is being pushed. And what shocks me, even though I've studied the RSS and the Hindu Mahasabha and BJP and, their ancestors over a long period of time. But it continues to still shock one that they can be so devoid of even humanitarian principles or feelings towards their own people, that at a time of crisis like this, where everybody's heart is actually just weeping, looking at what's going on around us, the human tragedy that we are witnessing. Sitaram said, yes, I think if you talk in terms of numbers who are on the road, the numbers are bigger. We talk about 6 million people who were displaced, which India had to handle. Today we are talking about much, much bigger numbers of people who've even gone by train. I think Indian railways have shifted. And if you put together, today I was reading 50 lakhs by bus and another so much number by train, We are talking of far bigger numbers, and there's still so many crores left over. When we say 6 billion, it is not even equal to 1 crore, And today 1 crore is a figure that is mentioned very easily about how people who have faced unemployment and this and that and the other. So we are actually, it is a tragedy of a scale of which is very difficult even, I think, for people to grasp. But we have to bring it out and get people to grasp it. The number of people affected today by this mass migration that's happening is larger than many countries put together. And we need to give those comparative figures. The whole of Ireland has 8 million people. We've shifted, I don't know how many times that number by train and road and foot and bicycle in the last month since this thing reached this kind. If you just think of it in those terms, I mean, it is a frightening and very, very, what should I say, humbling, the whole thing, when you realize what we are up against. And I don't know, I mean, sometimes my mind just beyond a point cannot grasp what's going on. You would imagine that at a point like this, faced with a crisis of such proportions which affect so much of humanity, the government would try to bring in, of course, we all know their own lack of internal talent, that's not a secret, but there's a lot of talent in this country. There's expertise which is non-political. There are doctors, there are scientists, there are others who can tell them what to do. Even the bureaucracy is still a functional bureaucracy, but not a bureaucracy who's told what to do and who's told to find scapegoats for what they can't do. But though I think this is the time where you should actually have, if not formally a national government, but you should be taking advice and giving a role to all political parties. Not just once in a while people giving suggestions, but actually a role to play. I mean, look, I'll give you an example which is a strange one. When the Second World War was being fought, the British government in India, took in Indians at the highest level into the executive council, including Ambedkar, in order to help in the national effort. In fact, the Congress offered to become part of a national government. Their demand was this crisis requires a national government. Of course, the British government was not willing to give the Congress what it wanted, because it wanted naturally more control and more voice, but it still took in representative Indians, in order to make the point that they are carrying the nation with them. Why can't this government do something like that? In other countries, their prime ministers and heads of state talk every day to their people. In a country like Malaysia, their king addresses them. We have, silence for weeks. A countdown, a lockdown is going to end presumably in 2 or 3 days' time. We don't know. There are no consultations with chief ministers even this time. Only Home Minister has picked up the phone and talked to people. Not even the kind of meeting we had between the Prime Minister and Chief Ministers earlier. What's going on? How can we handle this crisis? So obviously it's going from bad to worse. And all you can do is put people who say the emperor has no clothes, you put them in jail. That's all you can do. That won't take us anywhere.
Pushparaj sir, in talking about Nehru, we must recognize that he in some way paved the way for his successors, primarily Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. and the much lauded Congress system which Rajni Kothari talked about. But it was methodically dismantled by his successors. Does that raise questions about his democratic credentials? Do you think, in a way, Nehru is responsible for the current state of the Congress party?
That's like a tricky one. Uh, well, okay. Taking from what Sitaram sir was saying, and Professor Mukherjee has argued in many places, the Congress party is not just a party. At least the way it was envisaged, it was a movement. It encompassed different ideologies, religions, genders, castes, regions. It was a reflection, a mirror of India, you know. So I don't feel that Nehru strictly adhered to this conception of the Congress party, and I don't think he was pro dynastic politics, because I think in his last interview, it was on the 17th of May 1964, a few days before his death, when he argued that it is highly unlikely that Indira Gandhi would be his heir. And the larger question that you are asking is, of course, not about dynastic politics. The larger question that you're asking is, why is the Congress party and or other secular parties, why are they not being able to tackle the regressive politics that we are facing? That's, of course, applicable not just to the opposition parties, but also to the people's movement, civil society, and citizen groups. Now, there, I think the cause of this weakness is threefold. Firstly, there's ideological and organizational weakness in all of them. They've got used to a certain style of functioning, which happens when democracy is mature. The BJP, of course, has never been in government and always has been a insurgency kind of group. So that's one problem. And the opposition parties, civil society groups, movements are suddenly faced with this insurgent group, which is vehemently opposed to everything that they stand for, the principles, the values that have shaped the nation so far. So that's one big problem. The second big problem is that I think that over the years, India has become aspirational in ways that we did not imagine. The paradigm when Nehru was still alive and still Indira Gandhi was about poverty alleviation. That, I think, has undergone a fundamental shift. Yogendra Singh, a famous sociologist who taught in JNU, often argued that the same people that he had studied 10, 20 years after he had studied them suddenly said that yes, we are poor, but we don't need the state's support. We don't need the state to help us up. We need the state to empower us. Now that's a fundamental shift. The opposition and the civil society groups and movements have, I don't think, adopted to this change. There is a lack of a positive, hopeful vision that appeals to this aspirational India. That's the second big problem. And the third big problem is that there has been a collapse of the patronage network that the Congress system that you talked about, that Rajni Kothari has spoken about, that patronage network has more or less collapsed. Now, you can argue that the Aam Aadmi Party and the Swaraj Party could perhaps take on the BJP, but that's not going to happen for the next 2 decades at least. There are roughly 5,000 MLAs and MPs and 250 municipal corporations across India, some 300, 400 Zilla Panchayats. There are only 2 parties today that have that kind of pan-India presence who can take on the regressive politics that we are facing. So, to answer your question in one line, all of us today have to rework our strategies and operational methodologies. We will need to, as Sitaram sir was talking about, and he's been talking about this in multiple fora, is that we will have to forge a new coalition, recreate something like the freedom movement to safeguard the values that we hold dear and further the constitutional promise of India.
Sitaram sir, the BJP and other detractors of Nehru have pointed out on a number of occasions that Nehru failed with regard to Kashmir and China. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't think so. Yes, there are some many things that Nehru did, both for Kashmir as far as China is concerned, which I've been critical about, I continue to be critical about. But to say that all these problems are there because of Nehru would be a gross injustice to him. And the whole point is to try and understand that Jammu and Kashmir was a kingdom for more than a century before we became independent. Integrating that into India meant a special treatment that had to be done. Today you go there, the palace which has now been turned into a hotel, you'll find a tree which still has a plaque saying, it is under this tree that Mahatma Gandhi met Raja Hari Singh to talk to him, to say, come and join India. It is only when, under the Sheikh, the Muslim population, they resisted the invading Pakistani invaders, and then they declared that we'd rather be with a secular democratic India than a theocratic Pakistan, that Maharaja Hari Singh was forced to sign the accession. So there are historical reasons, circumstances, there's a history and a very rich history, and Kashmiriyat is something that I think, there was a very, very fundamental epistemological break in India's civilizational advance when you cut off the Kashmiriyat from us. That was the height of, it went beyond Sufism in Islam, and something which Darashiko was trying to then take it forward. Well, anyway, we are entering into a different terrain altogether, which was cut short by the zealots of that time when Aurangzeb was brought in, etc. Well, that's a different issue. But a very, very rich history, Nehru was trying to integrate that with him. That is, I think, a much higher effort that was being made than just territorial integrity or the unity and integrity of the Indian nation. Well, that I think is wrongly understood. And with China, yes, they were Hindi China Chini bye bye was after all the slogan. And Nehru is on record, which I don't know is right or wrong, saying that it was Chawanlai who told him that you don't eat tandoori chicken with a knife and a fork. You'll have to pick it up with your hand. And he picked it up with the hand. They had a bonhomie of that sort. And it was from the Chawanlai that Nehru also picked up the idea of speaking in Hindi in the General Assembly, because he was speaking in Chinese. So, you see, then something went wrong. We have that Maxwell's book of India's China War. There are lots of issues involved there. But you can't attribute it to any one person's opinions or prejudices or behavior or decisions. That will be very, very wrong and I think very incorrect way of treating history. History has to be treated in a scientific manner, and it's not a question of apportioning blame on one individual or the other. I think what is being done today by saying that it's all because of Nehru is absolutely unscientific and ahistorical. There may be a role, there is a role that Nehru had played, which is right or wrong, critical or not, but to put the entire blame on that would be wrong.
Ma'am, Nehru laid great emphasis on planning and plan development. This government has dismantled the planning commission and abandoned the 5-year plans. But it did not cause any significant problems. Do you think Nehru's views on planning are relevant today?
I think I would disagree with you when you say that it's not caused any significant problems. I think, don't forget that the Planning Commission was one forum in which the federal structure of this country was maintained. That's where the states came. That's where they came and put forward their point of view, and the needs of all the states were then adjusted. There would be meetings where they would come and put forward their point of view, and the Planning Commission would have its own understanding, and they would negotiate. Now, where does the Chief Minister go today? Please tell me. You think the Chief Minister can go now and sit in the reception room of 7 Racecourse Road and wait for an interview with the Prime Minister in order to put forward their point of view? If they could go to Rajiv Kumar, it would be much easier. At least there's National Development Council doesn't meet anymore. No, this is a federal system. So, and let me also say that this country cannot survive unless it maintains its federal system. The people of this country, the states of this country, people with their diversities will not in the long term accept a unitary system of government where their autonomy, their cultural autonomy, their regional economic autonomy, their financial autonomy is not respected. That is another very great thing that we have to attribute to Nehru, is his deep understanding of this process, which came out of the freedom struggle again, of how to adjust the region and the nation, in a manner that the regions do not feel retarded or suppressed by being linked with the nation, that the two go forward together. There will be conflicts. There will be times when one seems to be dominating over the other. And yet within a democratic system, then you find ways of resolving those conflicts. There was the whole Hindi problem with Tamil Nadu. Let's not forget that Indira Gandhi herself, she rushed down over there in order to go and assure the Tamil people that Hindi will not be imposed ever, and it has not been since then. So the Planning Commission played a very important role, apart from the fact that I think in any society, planning is necessary. Surely you need at least a 5-year vision. You actually need a much longer term vision. I mean, how did we make so much progress from the late 40s into the 50s? Because the process of planning had started in 1937, when Jawaharlal Nehru and the National Congress set up the National Planning Committee, with Subhash Bose, mind you, as the head. And there were any number of groups who made detailed plans for each sector. And it was that at once independence came, blueprints, bare bones of the blueprints were all ready. People knew what they had to do. The debates, the discussions had already been taken place over the last decade in a formal kind of a way. So, to say that the loss of the Planning Commission, it has not made any difference. I think it's premature, and I think it's really, I'm only giving one example. I'm sure we could give so many other examples of the kind of, because Planning Commission, by the way, was not just about the economy. It was also about welfare. There was a whole wing there which looks after women and children. I mean, there's a wing which looks after education. So planning is not just a question of, how to distribute the budget. It's not equal to the finance minister coming out with a budget. Those are two. In fact, the whole idea was that these are two separate exercises. There is a body which looks at the long term, which looks at the vision, and which also then sees how to go on adjusting that as differences, conflicts, needs arise. Your institutions, I mean, the whole role of institutions, when you weaken institutions or you destroy them or you abolish them, you centralize power. Centralizing power may be good for certain individuals for a short period of time, but for the country it's disastrous. And I can tell you, even for a political party that may think it's good for them even in the short run, in the long term it will be disastrous. And certainly a country of India's size and complexity, its history, its economy, its caste system, its disparity, its economic disparity. To imagine that any one person, no matter how brilliant, he could be a Nehru or a Gandhi or whoever, or you could even go higher if you like, can possibly have all the solutions to all the problems. It's crazy. It can't happen. So you need institutions, because when those institutions go on functioning, the system continues to function. And then there is people at the top, there are top leaders, there are the other leaders, there are whole institutions which keep seeing to it that all the creases and the conflicts and the all keep going on, sorted out over time, so that the vehicle continues to move forward, It's a complex system. When you reduce the complexity in the system, you sacrifice something. Do you think that today, if we had a planning commission that works with some authority, that it would not have made a difference? Voices from within the government also need to speak up, And they do. Yes, that's where institutional strength comes. When yesterday the judiciary has spoken, has it not added power to all of us? Has it not? The fact that whatever be the the route through which it has come, we have all criticized it, but the very fact that what the institution of the judiciary has yesterday, the Supreme Court has come out with the kind of pronouncement on the issue of migrant labor, it's very important. It's very important. It's a big gain forward. When the high courts are coming out with their judgments, however belated, it's very important. So saving institutions is extremely important. When universities, as Sitaram was saying, continue to function as Nehru said, then all is well with the world. What it means is when dissent keeps on happening, when thought keeps on occurring, when debate and the next generation is trained, and that keeps on happening in the society, then the society is good. It's on the right rails. A government may come and go. You may get good leaders or bad leaders. Nobody can predict. We look at the world around us. I mean, who would ever imagine that at a moment of crisis like this, so much of the world would be having the kind of leaders that we have, whom we may have been able to tolerate in better times when they couldn't do too much harm. But today we certainly could do without. I don't want to name names. All of us know what we are talking about, It's also a very sad fate of humanity that we are faced with the situation where we have such brilliance to take us through this crisis, Sometimes one wonders what kind of a God there is for those who believe in a God, that he would have put us in this kind of a civilizational crisis and then given us such helmsmen to take the chariot through. The whole thing becomes also very bizarre at times.
Yes, ma'am. Before we conclude, Pushparat sir, can we have brief remarks about the relevance of Panchsheel today, and what do you think of Panchsheel today with respect to India's current international relations with its neighbors especially?
Well, briefly, let's contextualize what's happening in the world today because of Corona. America first, Britain first, China even had this bide your time and grow your strength. What's common all of them? They're all marked by protectionist policies, state control over strategic and key sectors, and planned development. I mean, Nehru did what he did. I mean, the entire concept of non-alignment and Panchsheel was so that in his Independence Day speech in 1949, I think, he said that we shall not join any power bloc, and we shall endeavor to cooperate and be friendly with every nation. I mean, that is, after a century of exploitation, India and Nehru took a very smart decision. Bide our time, grow our strength, and then open up. I mean, and the larger question is it problematic to want to be friendly with all? I mean, or do you think that saber-rattling with anyone is going to get us anywhere? Look at where, as you said, look at where India is with our neighborhood today. Neighborhood first has actually become neighborhood last. We have soured our relations with Nepal, Maldives, China. In fact, we are having a face-off with China today as we talk about this thing, and the government is completely mute. In stark contrast, look at how Nehru tried to be even-handed between all the power blocks of the day. Just look at the Suez Canal crisis. Can you imagine the current dispensation with its antithesis for non-alignment ever taking a moral stand on any geopolitical issues? Just look at the Rohingya crisis, for instance. Frankly, I feel that COVID has today dramatically altered the global terms of the global order. Today, every country is non-aligned. In this day and age, I think Nehru's relevance, his ideas about foreign policy, about geopolitics are especially relevant today. And this government does not have the bandwidth or the mental capacity to deal with what is going to come now. And it's going to, frankly speaking, require a new set of leaders.
Even 56 years after his death, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru is seen as a contentious figure in Indian politics, maybe even more so now than in his own time. The BJP's obsession with Pandit Nehru is more focused on rallying him as a historical figure representing all that is wrong with India. And in the past few years, the BJP has kept the Nehru story alive to present its own alternative idea of India. He has been blamed consistently for strategic failures as well as domestic problems, and caricatured as someone who chose to borrow Western ideas and ignored India's history. At this political juncture, it is imperative to analyze the Nehruvian consensus and legacy and ask ourselves not just why Nehru, but why not Nehru. Thank you everyone for joining us today.